My boots were already laced up. My keys were in my hand. The November wind rattling the windows of my apartment in Ottawa. That particular knife cold that only comes in late fall when the city hasn't quite decided whether to fight winter or surrender to it. I was 7 minutes from walking out the door to drive 2 hours west to my brother's farmhouse in Renfrew County for what he called a family healing weekend. His words, not mine. I remember thinking that phrase sounded like something printed on a spa brochure, not something my brother Daniel would ever say unprompted. That should have been my first warning. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I almost didn't check it. I thought it was my colleague reminding me about Monday's file review, but the name on the screen stopped me cold. It was Miss Tremblay, my estate lawyer. The message was 4 words and a phone number. Do not go. Call. I stood there in my hallway, keys digging into my palm, reading those 4 words 3 times. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it was Daniel. Hey, just checking? You're on your way? Mom made tourtière. Drive safe. The 417 gets icy past Arnprior. The warmth of that message against the ice of Miss Tremblay's warning turned my stomach. I set my keys down on the counter very carefully, like they might shatter. I sat down on the floor right there in the hallway, back against the wall, and I called my lawyer. She picked up on the first ring, which told me everything about how seriously she was taking this. Listen to me carefully, she said, and her voice had that particular Quebec-clipped precision she used when something was genuinely urgent. I received documents this afternoon. I'm sending them to you right now. Do not get in that car until you've read what I'm about to tell you. Before I tell you what she told me, I want to ask you something. Have you ever looked back on a period of your life and realized that what you thought was your own anxiety, your own instability, was actually somebody else's hands on the controls? That the chaos you were drowning in wasn't random? Leave a comment below. I think more of us have been there than we'd ever admit. Miss Tremblay didn't waste time. Your brother isn't planning to contest your father's estate through the courts. A legal challenge takes 18 months minimum, and your 28th birthday is in 9 days. That's when the secondary trust structure your father set up releases the remaining $340,000 directly into your control. He cannot touch it once that transfer completes. I heard her draw a breath, the kind that precedes something that changes the shape of a room. Daniel has been in contact with a private medical transport company based out of Kingston. We found the email chain through the estate disclosure process. He made the mistake of CCing a shared family account your father's executor still monitors. The plan is to use the weekend gathering to stage a wellness intervention. He's going to claim to your mother that you've been struggling with addiction and erratic behavior. He has someone coming to that farmhouse, a man who lost his medical license in Ontario 2 years ago, but your brother apparently doesn't know that or doesn't care to sign off on a Form 1 under the Mental Health Act. If they get a Form 1 signed and you're transported to a psychiatric facility, your ability to manage your own financial affairs gets frozen. An emergency trustee steps in. Daniel's name is already on the paperwork as proposed substitute decision maker. The floor was very cold through my jeans. I noticed that in a distant way, like my body was trying to give me something concrete to feel while my mind was dismantling 3 years of my life and rebuilding them in a completely different shape. 3 years. That's how long I'd been convinced I was falling apart. It started after Dad died. He passed 18 months after his diagnosis, a brain tumor, swift and brutal, and completely unfair, the way those things always are. He left behind the farmhouse, a modest RRSP, a life insurance policy, and the trust structure his financial advisor had helped him set up specifically to protect me. Dad had always worried about me in the particular way parents worry about the child they recognize as most like themselves, a little too trusting, a little too slow to see bad intentions in people they love. He'd been right to worry. I just didn't know the threat was already inside the house. After the funeral, Daniel became my anchor. He was 10 years older than me, already settled, already steady. He handled the estate paperwork, sat across from Miss Tremblay with me, drove me to the notary. He cooked Sunday dinners and let me cry at his kitchen table and told me I was going to be okay. I believed him. I leaned on him completely. And then, slowly, so slowly, I never caught the shift. I started to become unreliable. Important documents I knew I'd filed went missing from my apartment. Twice I showed up to appointments that had apparently been canceled, except I had never canceled them and found no record of having done so. My email password stopped working for 3 days in October of that year. Daniel helped me reset it, sitting right beside me, his hand on my shoulder. I started waking up in the night convinced I'd forgotten something critical, some bill, some form, some deadline. I started keeping obsessive lists. I started apologizing constantly, to colleagues, to friends, to my own doctor. Daniel was always there when I fell apart, always sighing that particular sigh. You've been like this since Dad died. I'm worried about you. You know, Aunt Suzanne had similar episodes. Mental health issues run in families. Have you thought about seeing someone? I had thought about it. I had seen someone. My therapist told me I was grieving and under stress. She didn't tell me I was being dismantled from the outside, because neither of us knew that was a possibility. I swallowed everything Daniel offered me. The concern, the gentle redirection, the implication that my mind was a faulty instrument I couldn't trust. I let him become the authority on my own interior life. I thanked him for it. Sitting on that hallway floor, reading the emails. Miss Tremblay had forwarded to my phone the ones between my brother and the transport company, the ones where he described me as increasingly delusional and a risk to herself, the ones with the proposed timeline built around my birthday. I felt the fog lift, not gradually, all at once, like someone had thrown open a window in a room that had been sealed for years. I wasn't broken. I had been being broken, methodically, by someone who had access to my apartment, who knew my passwords, who'd been positioned as my most trusted person since the day we stood together at our father's graveside in the Beechwood Cemetery. There is a particular kind of grief that comes from realizing the person who helped you bury your father was already thinking about what he could take from you at the reception afterward. Miss Tremblay, I said. My voice came out much steadier than I expected. I'm going. Silence. Absolutely not. She'll try again. Next weekend, or the one after, or she'll show up at my building with Mom and a story already prepared. I need this to end tonight, not be postponed. I caught myself. He'll try again. Another silence. Longer. If you go, she said carefully, you go with everything documented in advance, and you do not go alone. I know, I said. I'm already thinking. I hung up. I sat on that floor for exactly 2 more minutes. Then I stood up, picked up my keys, and started making calls. My first call was to a walk-in clinic on Maryvale Road that offered same-day blood work with rush processing for an additional fee. I drove there, paid the $180 out of pocket, gave 3 vials of blood, and walked out 40 minutes later with a printed confirmation, full toxicology screen, BAC, and a brief cognitive status note from the attending physician. Clean. Completely clean. Dated, time-stamped, signed. My second call was to my cousin Margot. Margot was 22. Daniel's daughter from his first marriage, living in that farmhouse in the guest suite because Daniel had told her she could stay there rent-free while she finished her college program in Pembroke. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks. Daniel had gradually, gently managed my relationship with Margot the same way he'd managed everything else, suggesting she was flaky, that she repeated things he'd said in confidence, that I shouldn't rely on her. I'd pulled back. I felt sick about that now. She answered on the second ring. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. Tante, she said, using the French-Canadian habit she'd picked up from her grandmother. Cited. Are you coming? There's a white medical van parked at the back of the property near the woodshed. It's been there since 3 o'clock. Dad told me it was a delivery. It's not a delivery, I said. I kept my voice even. I needed her calm. Margot, listen to me. You know the drinks cabinet in the sitting room? The one next to the fireplace? Yeah. Is there a bottle of red wine already open on the sideboard? Or a decanter set out? I heard her move through the house quietly. A pause. There's a decanter. It's already been poured into glasses. He set the table an hour ago. Of course he had. Daniel was meticulous. He'd always been meticulous. I used to admire that about him. Near the decanter, is there anything small? A small container? A vial? A medicine bottle? Another pause. Longer. There's a little brown dropper bottle. Behind the decanter. I thought it was bitters. It was not bitters. Margot, I need you to do something, and I need you to do it right now, in the next 3 minutes, before he comes back into that room. Can you do that? Her breathing went fast and shallow, the way Kay's had. Young women in houses full of danger, being asked to be braver than anyone their age should have to be. Yes, she said. Take the dropper bottle. Go to the bathroom at the end of the hall, not the one near Dad's room, the other one. Pour whatever is in it down the sink. Rinse the bottle. Fill it back up with water and put it exactly where you found it. Then wash your hands and go back to your room. What's in it? I don't know yet for certain. But I'm going to find out. And so is everyone else. I paused. You're not in trouble. None of this is your fault. But I need you to be brave for 3 minutes. And then I promise you, things are going to change tonight. Okay? She exhaled, shaky, resolved. Okay, I'm doing it now. Delete this call? Delete it. I sat in the clinic parking lot until she texted me a single word. Done. I started the car. The drive west from Ottawa on the 417 is one of those roads that feels different at night. In summer, it's cottage country pastoral. Tim Hortons every 40 kilometers. The Ottawa River flashing silver through the tree line. In November, in the dark, it contracts. The sky sits low. The trees close in on both sides, bare and black against a gray-purple sky. I'd driven this road 100 times growing up. Going to the farmhouse for Christmas, for Thanksgiving, for the kind of family gatherings that seemed ordinary until you understood what was underneath them. The Trans-Canada is not a road that forgives inattention. I had to be careful. I had to think. I was not going as the struggling little sister Daniel had spent 3 years constructing. I was going as someone who had spent the last 4 hours building a structure he was about to walk into face first. In the bag on my passenger seat, the printed toxicology report, the forwarded emails, printed at a FedEx on Baseline Road before I left the city, a small personal audio recorder, legal in Ontario for single-party consent conversations. My satellite communicator, a Garmin InReach Mini I'd bought for a backcountry trip 2 summers ago and never returned, clipped to the inside of my jacket. Miss Tremblay was driving separately. She had called in a favor with a former client who happened to be a retired OPP investigator now doing private work. They were 20 minutes behind me. She had also been in contact with the Ontario Provincial Police Detachment in Renfrew, who were aware that a person with no current medical license was potentially on the premises intending to fraudulently commit a Form 1. They were taking that very seriously. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror somewhere around Calabogie Road. I didn't look like someone coming apart at the seams. I looked like my father's daughter, steady, clear-eyed, tired of being lied to. The farmhouse sat on a concession road off Highway 132, a century home with a wraparound porch, propane heat, and the kind of deliberate rural isolation that feels charming at Christmas and sinister at night in November. The laneway was gravel, long enough that you could see the house lights from the road but not reach them quickly. Smart of him, choosing this place for this particular night. No neighbors within screaming distance. No cell service past the second concession. I'd confirmed that with Margot, who relied on the farmhouse Wi-Fi to call her friends. What Daniel didn't know was that the Garmin InReach works on the Iridium satellite network, not cellular. He didn't know that Miss Tremblay had the device number and was tracking my location in real time. He didn't know the OPP had been briefed. He didn't know Margot had already neutralized the dropper bottle. He thought he was getting the sister who'd spent 3 years doubting her own mind. He was getting someone considerably less convenient. I pulled up the laneway and killed the headlights for the last 50 meters. Out of habit more than strategy. The farmhouse windows were warm and orange. Smoke from the wood stove. Mom's car in the driveway, which hit me somewhere soft she was here. She believed whatever he'd told her. She had no idea what she was sitting inside. Daniel opened the door before I reached the porch steps. He looked the same as always. Tall, flannel shirt. The permanently calm face that I had once read as steadiness and now understood was simply the absence of guilt in someone who had decided guilt was optional. He spread his arms open. There she is, he said, warm and easy. We were starting to wonder. The 417 was slow past Arn Pryor, I said. I let myself step into the hug. I felt him check, briefly. The way you check a person you're assessing? I had no recording equipment on the outside of my body. I smiled up at him. Something smells incredible. Did Mom actually make tourtière? She's been in the kitchen since noon. He held the door open, his hand at the small of my back, guiding. The old script. The gentle management of where I was and where I was going. Come inside. There's someone I want you to meet. The farmhouse sitting room was warm from the wood stove and overlit from the overhead fixture Daniel had always kept too bright. Another thing I'd never clocked as deliberate until tonight. Hard to look confused or fragile in good lighting. Hard to look credible and calm too, unless you actually were. My mother was setting the table in the dining room off the hall, her back to me. She turned, and her face did the complicated thing it always did when she saw me lately, relief and worry braided together. She opened her arms. Ma pousse, she said softly. Her old nickname for me, the one that meant little flea in Quebecois slang, the one she'd used since I was 4 years old. I held on to her for a moment longer than usual. Hey, Mom, I said into her shoulder. It's really good to see you. I meant that absolutely. In the sitting room, standing near the fireplace with a glass of water he hadn't touched, was a man I didn't know, mid-50s, heavyset, wearing a button-down shirt under a blazer that didn't quite sit right, like someone had told him to look professional and he'd interpreted the instruction literally but not naturally. He assessed me the way a person does when they're looking for something specific. "This is Dr. Beaumont," Daniel said. "Old hockey buddy from my Carleton days." He was passing through Renfrew and I thought, perfect timing. Come for dinner. "Lovely to meet you," Dr. Beaumont said. He smiled with his mouth only. "You too," I said pleasantly. I looked at him for exactly 1 beat too long, then looked away. Let him think I'd noticed nothing and everything simultaneously. On the sideboard next to the decanter, the little brown dropper bottle, exactly where Margot had replaced it, the water inside looking close enough to whatever had been there before. The decanter itself, the dark red wine already poured into 4 glasses on the tray. Daniel moved toward the sideboard. His movements were practiced. Familiar with the room, familiar with the plan. I watched him add 2 or 3 drops from the dropper bottle to one specific glass. He'd angled his back to the room, but I was standing at the wrong angle for the maneuver to be invisible. I stored it. I said nothing. He turned around and held out the glass. "Cabernet from that vineyard in Prince Edward County," he said. "You always loved their stuff." I did love their stuff. That detail, the genuine one, embedded in the manipulation was the part that actually hurt. I took the glass. I sat down in the armchair nearest the window, the one where I could see both the front door and the hall leading to the back of the house. I held the glass in my lap. "I've actually been having kind of a rough couple of weeks," I said, looking down at the floor. I heard Daniel settle opposite me. I heard Dr. Beaumont shift forward slightly in his chair. "I don't know. I keep feeling like I'm losing track of things, like I can't hold on to time properly." The room was very quiet. "Oh, sweetheart," my mother said from the doorway, and the worry in her voice was entirely real, entirely genuine, entirely borrowed from a false story her son had been feeding her for months. I felt a flash of cold fury on her behalf. "That's actually something I'd love to talk with you about a little," Dr. Beaumont said, using the careful, neutral cadence of someone trained in a clinical tone he no longer had any right to use. "Your brother mentioned you've been under a lot of stress since your father passed." I said. I lifted the wine glass to my lips. I tilted it. I did not drink. The liquid touched my mouth and did not pass my lips. I lowered the glass and let a small sigh escape. "Sorry. I feel like I might be a little dizzy already." The drive. Daniel checked his watch. He did it very subtly, but I had been watching for it. "Maybe you should lie down in the guest room for a bit," he said. And there it was, the first move on the board, the transition from dinner to somewhere more controlled. "I don't think I need to lie down," I said. My voice changed. I didn't perform it. It simply happened, the shift from careful to clear. I set the wine glass on the side table. "I think what I actually need is for everyone in this room to understand what's about to happen." Daniel frowned, practiced concern. "What are you talking about?" "Dr. Beaumont," I said, without looking away from my brother. "I looked you up on the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario's public register this afternoon. Your license has been suspended since 2022. Prescribing irregularities." I paused. "So whatever Form 1 you were planning to sign tonight is going to be worth exactly nothing, and will in fact constitute fraud." The room went very still. I reached into my jacket and unclipped the garment. The small orange LED was solid, which meant the connection was live. I set it on the coffee table. "Miss Tremblay, my estate lawyer, is currently at the end of the laneway with a retired OPP investigator. The provincial police detachment in Renfrew has been briefed on the situation. This device has been transmitting my location and a status signal for the past 4 hours." My mother made a sound I had never heard from her before. Not a word, just a sound. Daniel stood up. The practiced calm finally cracked. Not dramatically, not the way it happens in films, but in the small, specific way of someone who has just understood that the exit they plan to use has been bricked up. "You don't know what you're talking about. You've been paranoid for 2 years. This is exactly what we've been trying to. The dropper bottle on the sideboard," I said steadily, "currently contains water. Margot replaced the contents approximately 2 hours ago." I watched his face. "She's been in this house. She's seen things. She's been scared for a long time, and I should have asked her about it sooner. That's on me." Margot appeared in the doorway from the hall. She was holding the original dropper bottle in a Ziploc bag she had, without me asking, thought to retrieve it from where she'd hidden it, with the original contents. She was 22 years old, and steadier in that moment than most people I'd met twice her age. I kept the original, she said quietly, holding up the bag. I thought someone might need it. I could have wept. Whatever is in that bottle, I said to Dr. Beaumont, is about to be tested. And your presence in this house, on this night, with a fraudulent plan to commit an involuntary psychiatric hold, is a matter for the college and for the police. He stood up. He looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at the door. Neither of them made it to the door. Headlights swept the front window. Miss Tremblay's car coming up the laneway, the second set of headlights behind it belonging to a white SUV. I didn't recognize the retired investigator had clearly brought a colleague. By the time the knock came at the front door, Dr. Beaumont had sat back down again with the particular deflated posture of a man who has understood that the night is not going the direction he was paid for. My mother opened the door herself, before anyone else could reach it. She stood on the porch, looking at Miss Tremblay and the two men behind her, and then she turned and looked at her son with an expression that broke my heart and repaired something in me simultaneously. She said his name once, just his name, in that mother voice that carries everything. Daniel looked at the floor. Miss Tremblay stepped inside. She looked at me with the careful, professional neutrality she always wore. But there was something in her eyes that I read as, "You did well." "The OPP are at the gate," she said. "Daniel, I'd suggest you not make this more difficult than it needs to be." He didn't make it more difficult. He was, to the end, the organized one. He sat down in the armchair I'd just vacated and folded his hands in his lap and waited for whatever came next with the same careful composure he'd brought to every manipulation of the past 3 years. Only now the composure had nowhere to go. Dr. Beaumont, it turned out, was more interested in cooperating than in loyalty to whatever Daniel had been paying him. He provided a written statement that night. The Ziploc bag with the dropper bottle went with the investigator for testing. The results, 4 days later, confirmed what Margot and I had already suspected: a sedative compound, something that would have produced disorientation and slurred speech within 20 minutes of ingestion. My birthday came 9 days later, on a Tuesday. The trust transfer completed at midnight the way it had been scheduled to since my father set it up, quietly and without ceremony, the way he'd done most of the important things in his life. Miss Tremblay called me at 12:04 to confirm. I was sitting at my kitchen table in Ottawa, Margot across from me, both of us with tea that had gone cold while we talked. The farmhouse went to my mother, as it should have. She and I have been talking more, carefully, rebuilding something that Daniel's version of events had gradually eroded over 3 years. She didn't know. I knew she didn't know. That mattered more to me than I expected it to. Margot moved into my second bedroom in December. She's finishing her program in the spring. She's quieter than she used to be, and sometimes I catch her startling at sounds she shouldn't have to startle at. We're both still untangling the ways that house and that man had shaped us without our consent. I suspect we'll be doing that for a while. Some things take longer to repair than a birthday transfer and a court date. Daniel's hearing is scheduled for March. The charges include criminal fraud, conspiracy to unlawfully confine, and obtaining financial advantage by fraud under the Criminal Code of Canada. His lawyer has entered a not guilty plea, which surprised exactly no one who spent time in that farmhouse listening to him explain the world. I think about my father sometimes, about how carefully he built that trust structure, about whether he suspected something, or whether he was just a man who loved his daughter and knew that love sometimes means building a wall before anyone has announced their coming. I think he knew. I think about what I would say to anyone who recognizes this story from the inside: the lost appointments, the missing documents, the person who is always there with a sad sigh and a careful hand on your shoulder, the person who has made themselves indispensable to your sense of reality. Trust the version of events that lives in your body, not the one someone else has been writing for you. That feeling that something is wrong, that you can't quite account for the drift, that the ground keeps shifting under your feet, it might not be you. It might be exactly what it feels like. It might be someone standing just behind you with their hand on a dial you can't see. Get the documentation. Find the one person you haven't let them manage. And do not, under any circumstances, get in the car until you've read the message. Some texts save your life.